And now the senior speaker, Ashley Alvarez.
When each of us first crossed the bridge as Midland students, whether we were freshmen, sophomores, or juniors, 13, 14, 15, or 16, we became one, brought together by luck, chance, destiny, whatever you choose to believe. In the beginning, it wasn't quite evident yet that we were some sort of dysfunctional family. In fact, the only source of communication between the genders were two single individuals, one boy and one girl, each either chosen or self-sacrificed to act as an ambassador. Yes, the united individuals you see before you today were incredibly divided. However, we got accustomed to each other, and by our freshman experiential week, we began to resemble something similar to a family. The 4-day backpacking trip into the Manzana proved to be one of the most physically demanding trips most of us had ever experienced. But once we returned, there were plenty of legendary stories to share. David survived an assassination attempt in which a rock was sent sailing into his neck, leaving everyone to panic as he crumpled to the floor. Thomas endured a sprained ankle, which he received while simply walking through the creek on a journey to collect water, and ignoring all the first aid training we received prior to the trip, continued to not yell for help, but attempt to sprint back to the campsite by himself. He was only discovered because somebody asked why the water hadn't arrived yet. That trip, a new group was even born, the Scramblers, a group of elites who had so bravely scaled the rocky summit, otherwise known as Hurricane Deck. To say the least, Freshman Experiential Week was a crucial turning point for our class, even further strengthening our bond. About a year later, with 5 new additions, we all gathered once again for our sophomore year experiential activities. As the only class left on campus, we made sure to take advantage of our newly discovered power whenever we could, though we had little to no free time between planting billions of onions, digging miles of trenches and holes, and spreading thousands of pounds of mulch. We spent hours working as hard as we could on our duties, yet we still made sure to push a couple tables together in Stillman to eat together for every meal. On the last night of our week, we decided to go on a hard luck to Tank Mesa. Late that night, we played Capture the Flag in the dark, and of course, a good camping trip requires at least one near-death experience, so Eleanor took one for the team and tripped on a log, receiving a black eye, a bloody nose, and a sizable gash. This is also why nobody's allowed to play Capture the Flag on camping trips anymore. You're welcome. Junior year, for Experiential Week, we headed to Fresno to build houses, which entailed painting, hammering, wiring, and lifting beams. After a couple of hours working, it was time for the traditional injury. Picture Eliza, carrying a 20-foot 2x4 by herself. Now look down at her feet. She's wearing thin fabric combat boots. I'm guessing you can imagine what happened. The rest of the trip actually went smoothly, a little too smoothly. In return, our campsite received a spontaneous torrent of rain that lasted all night and nearly washed away a couple of tents. Then, to top it off, just as we were about to leave, Tim locked the keys inside one of the Suburbans, trapping us there until AAA arrived quite a while later. But as we waited, piling into the other Suburbans, even leaving a couple others to fend for themselves in the rain, we unconsciously grew ever closer. This year, as seniors, most of us split up to participate in varying activities relating to our senior theses. However, the time was made up this week when all 25 of us, with the aid of Paul, Janet, Linda, and Sam, escaped for the last time as a class of Midland students. For our senior trip, we camped at San Simeon Beach for 2 days. This little vacation was unanimously agreed to be the best class trip we've been on by far. Before we even arrived at the beach, we stopped at the sand dunes for lunch, although we barely ate. Instead, we surfed down the massive mounds of boogie boards and did catapults, rolls, and flips over the edges for what seemed like an eternity, but it still wasn't long enough. As was tradition, over every one of our trips, someone had to get hurt. This time, the honor was given to a veteran. While speeding down one of the slopes, attempting to be what we fondly refer to as an ultimate dune rider, our very own Julia Yamasaki sprained her ankle, only adding to the plethora of injuries she's received over the past 4 years of her Midland career. Since this is such a common occurrence for her, we simply went on our way, knowing she'd be fine after a few ibuprofen and rounds of tape and ice. That afternoon, after arriving at San Simeon, we headed to the water. Once there, David ran, fully clothed, into the ocean, being careful to take off his socks and shoes first, of course. Next up came Braden. After losing a game of odds with Martha, it became his turn to endure the harsh, freezing waters, although he didn't go alone. Noah, for some reason, decided to play this game of odds, but this time with 3 people, decreasing his odds of winning by about 75%. He lost. Begrudgingly, Braden and Noah stripped down to their underwear, not wanting to be sopping wet and cold like David, and ran into the surf. Meanwhile, Chris and David ran away with their clothes. After all the shenanigans had ceased and we'd eaten our dinner, we headed back to the beach again at around 9:30. Most of us stayed out until 12. You'd be surprised how much you learn about people through late-night games of Never Have I Ever. The next day, a majority of the class spent the day exploring Cambria, either wandering through shops or struggling to make it to the nearest food parlor after having skipped lunch to get their nails done. That night, we headed back to the beach. This time, though, we simply enjoyed each other's company through soft music, mumbles of memories, and occasionally abrupt laughter. On the way back to school, surrounded by close friends, people we've known for the past 2, 3, 4 years, people we've had the honor to watch grow and mature into the family you see sitting on this porch before you today, we experienced our last drive on Figueroa Mountain Road together. The reality hit us all differently. Whether we reflected on it quietly, blasted music in denial, or sobbed openly, as we crossed the bridge one last time, and as we sit on this stage together, ready to begin a new chapter in our lives, we are one.